So, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, welcome wherever you are. You joining me here in York today. Obviously, I am inside, and I'm going to give you my chapter of the Food Academy. First of all, I must say thank you to Alex Muller from Melbourne, who invited me to take part in this. I was initially a little bit reticent, simply because I've never really done a cookery tour on here before. I thought maybe people wouldn't associate me with it, but then as he was wanting to get a whole bunch of people, I thought, well, okay, as long as it's not just me, that would kind of work. And it was also very good because as soon as he said, I thought, crikey, do you want something vegan? Because I'm not so good at doing vegan food. But thankfully, Alex said, you just do what you want to do. So do something that talks about your culture, about the traditions and history. So I wanted to do something tonight that is very much a Northern English dish, as you might say. So I've chosen Lancashire Hotpot. You may know it also as Irish stew, essentially very, very similar. In Liverpool, they call it scouse. Essentially it's meat and potato casserole. It's not because I can't cook. I actually cook from fresh every day. It's not something I talk about on Heygo, but I actually am a very, very keen cook. It's my kind of relaxation is cookery. So Adrian B. There's lots of variations. So what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to switch us around. So I'm going to kind of show you my setup. Let's try and we can see and do this. And then we're going to go to hands. So you can see my hands. So this is where we're going to be working tonight. The flowers, this is going to dangle the camera over my hands so you can actually see what I'm doing. I will put up the recipe later, the information, but just to kind of point out, very, very simple. We've got obviously carrots and onions. We've got potatoes. We've got lamb. We've got thyme. There's a bay leaf hiding there somewhere. We've got some butter for greasing. It really is some flour for dusting. So this really is kind of very, very kind of simple food. So if you are all okay, is everybody kind of happy with kind of where we are? It is nice, isn't it, to cook with flowers? That's what I thought. I thought we'll have some flowers in just to kind of cheer us up. So has anybody got any burning questions? Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start preparing this dish, and then I'm going to kind of we'll get the other one out of the oven because it's like a Blue Peter thing. Here's one I prepared earlier. So I've actually got one in the oven cooking. Goat, yeah, we'll be perfect. Or beef, we'll talk about that a little bit later on, because it's a 2.5 hour cook time. So what I thought was we'd do the preparation live, and I'll pull one out of the oven and you can kind of see the finished problem. Yes, you have some questions. Well, if you want to pose them bit by bit, why don't you put because it's my tour and I get to choose, and I want to do this one. Because I think it's got more of a kind of story behind it. So if that's okay, I'm going to take us off this camera now, and I'm going to bring us on to Dangle Cam, which is very exciting. And so hopefully, if we get this set up right, you should be able to see. So you can see less and less of me now. So as ever, first things first. So can everybody see that okay? Can you see my hands? Is that working for people? Let's jump to the latest. Yep, fantastic. So as ever, we're doing meat. So we're just going to give our quick little sharpen of the knives. It's always good to have a sharp knife. Not least because I used to work in kitchens years ago. If you've ever cut yourself with a blunt knife, you'll know that you can really hurt yourself because what happens with blunt knives is you have to really push because it's too blunt. And so when it is slip, you really jab in and you get a big bruise. Whereas actually if you get a really sharp knife, it draws across, it's nasty, you get a bit of blood, but actually you're not going to get a particularly kind of bad injury. So part of the issue is, yeah, of course, any variance on this, although the long, slow cook time, you'd really want to look and think of what's going to survive for kind of 2 hours in the oven. So yeah, a sharp knife, much, much safer. So what we're going to do, we're going to start our kind of recipe, is we're going to need greasing. So I'm using a Pyrex bowl tonight, but actually historically anything would have been used. In actual fact, the Lancashire mill workers for whom there's only in bags and boxes actually. Of course it does, Linda. Hello, Linda. So we're going to get some butter on here, and I kind of find using greaseproof paper kind of good because obviously greaseproof paper, the grease doesn't sort of soak in. So what we need to do is give it just a good kind of spread of butter. So this isn't time to be thinking or worrying about cholesterol. I'm afraid this is a rather animal fat kind of product. So we'll just have plenty of butter in there. And again, what this can do is just going to prevent everything from sticking. Have you ever been to Tesco's, Nando's, Toad in the Hole? That's a long question. I don't know where the question sits in that green area. So if you want to shorten that down, I'll do my best to answer. So there's going to start off and say there is our greased tin. So you won't need to in a minute because this is basically just the bowl. So I'll put this one side. What we're now going to do is we're going to start layering, because this is, in essence, is all about kind of layering up. So consequently, we've now got our potatoes, and can use free from butter, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, any of these things are kind of adaptable in terms of, now I'm going to put the potato peeler. Now I've thrown myself at the first hurdle there. If needs be, I can use a kind of small knife, but I did have a peeler to hand, so just bear with me one moment while I just try and find it. I'm not at home, in case you're wondering, so just bear with me one moment. Yeah, I'm actually at my business, so this is why I've suddenly realised that the one thing that I haven't got to hand is a peeler, but nonetheless, not to worry, I will use a small knife instead, and that'll be absolutely fine. Where's that? Yep. So the potatoes will need peeling. So again, obviously, if you prefer using a potato peeler, you can do, or a knife, just whatever works for you, really. I did have a really nice peeler somewhere. I don't know what I've done with it, but nonetheless. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a Mandolin for these. If anybody's used a Mandolin before, they are a fantastic bit of kit. But again, you can nick your fingers on them, so quite nastily. So let's tell you what, we'll just crank it a little bit up. Hopefully that'll just give it a bit more. And obviously, because I'm watching what I'm doing, I'm not necessarily reading all the chat that's kind of coming through. I can see it, but I'll sort of glance up from time to time. So apologies if I kind of miss out. So in essence, what I've tried to do with this kind of recipe is I've had a look at what some of the other cooks have done in the kind of cookbooks and how they've kind of gone about, cooking. Because there's no kind of definitive recipe when it comes to, well, I'm afraid, Dali, we are, it's compromised, as you might say, because we haven't got a full studio set up here. This is really a bit kind of, if it's really so uncomfortable to watch, maybe leave this tour. I'm not trying to kick you out and saying there's only limited things that I can do to change it, because obviously it's got to work for me. I've got to be able to work safely and see what I'm doing. So I apologise if it's not perfect, but Heygo is still in its infancy in terms of, kind of what we're able to do, what we can do. And so we haven't got through a home sort of production facilities. So as you saw earlier, we are, everything's a bit sort of stitched, a bit Heath Robinson, as you might say. But anyway, we are aware. So potatoes-wise, by the way, there's a tendency to sort of think, oh, kind of nice waxy potatoes will work, but actually Maris Pipers are actually perfect, because what we're going to do with these potatoes is what we're going to do is we're going to put a layer at the bottom, and then we're going to put a second layer at the top. So consequently, the ones at the bottom are going to soak up all that lovely meat juice and gravy, okay? And then those that are at the top are going to be coated in butter, and they're going to crisp. So, I can't find my peeler. Just have a look. Have a look in the drawer. One more here. Do we have a peeler? This is the problem, because I don't live here. Never mind. No, we haven't. But nonetheless, I'll manage to find. It's slowed me down slightly, but we will manage. We'll be absolutely fine. No worries, absolutely. So it's more my inconvenience thing rather than anything particular. So yeah, obviously a peel will be sort of slightly quicker. But yeah, so Maris Piper are really, really good for this purpose, because they crisp up like chips, but they also make great mash. So basically, the meat at the bottom, is the gravy, if you like, is going to really kind of soak up the liquid. So that'll be like kind of mashed potato at the bottom. And then at the top, we're going to have corn. Corn. Yeah. So any of your kind of substitutes on here, obviously for those that aren't meat eaters, then of course, whatever works for you. But I wanted to just do this as kind of traditional as possible. And obviously, this is pretty much as old as the hills, kind of meat and potatoes. In terms of, almost every culture has got its own kind of variants on very basic kind of meat and potato stews. And this is ours. So, we're nearly done with the kind of potatoes now. So, we actually know that people have been cooking with stews since kind of ancient times. We just tougher? You can comfort, absolutely, yeah. And actually, the oldest known evidence that we have for stews goes back to the Jumon period in Japan. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it's kind of 10,000 years sort of plus. It really has been kind of with us forever, really. We've always kind of found ways of, cooking in stews, the sort of slow cooking. Herodotus, the Greek historian, he wrote that the Scythians in the 8th to the 4th centuries put flesh into animals' paunch. They mixed water with it and they boiled it like that. So he was talking obviously about kind of stewing techniques. Let me just get rid of these potato peelings, get these out of the way. We've been cooking as long as there's been people. This is painfully slow cooking. What? Jenny, I don't know, is that a critique? So yeah, we can give the potatoes a rinse. We'll just get them in the colander. And we've got some cabbage in there at the moment, so we'll just get that out. Put the potatoes in, give them a rinse. So what we have, if you haven't already encountered these, is what they call a Mandolin. Has anybody used these? They are a great bit of kit if you want to... Is that a serious comment? Is it genuinely upset at the speed that I'm cooking? I mean, this is just real-time cookery. I don't know what you would like me to. But anyway, basically, a Mandolin is great, but you can easily lose your fingers doing this. So do be careful. But basically, you spike them on, and then you run it blade down. And what you get is very nice, even slices. So, nobody, not even a professional chef, can cut and slice at that speed. So this is kind of perfect for our purposes, because what we want is to get a nice, even slicing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create two layers, if you like, within the bowl. So it's better if you've got some large potatoes and some smaller ones to leave the large potatoes for the top, just because it's going to work better in terms of the... it doesn't really matter what's at the bottom, because it's all going to sort of go in with the kind of gravy. So I think we've probably got enough there to do the bottom. We may do another one. So let's just take our sort of small, sort of raggy bits now, and what we're going to just do is just create a double layer. And everything is about seasoning in this. So as we go along, we're going to be adding salt and pepper and thyme, because obviously it's sort of fairly basic. So you really want to make sure that you've got plenty kind of going on in terms of your flavour. So it doesn't matter at the bottom layer. No one's going to see this. It's not about being pretty. You're just trying to create the base layer for your potatoes. Everything's going to sit on. So we're just going to complete with one more bit. There we go. So we've got our potatoes. So at this stage now, some pepper, some salt, a couple of little thyme leaves in just to... So again, I've got your kitchen, your rules, his kitchen, his rules. Yeah, I don't know what's being said, but so if people want to criticise what I'm doing, this is the first time I'm doing it live, so I can't respond because I can't see. But if you can just keep that to a minimum, that'd be great. So second layer. So again, just the same kind of principle. We're just really looking to get the sort of base coverage, not worrying too much about how it's going to look. So scalloping, we're just getting a nice kind of base layer of potato. So as I say, those were... So this is kind of a very traditional way of doing it. Now, there's all sorts of extra ingredients people put in various kind of recipes. And I'm going to be on this one side now. It really is kind of up to you as to what you sort of put in them. But I'm just giving this a border wipe down. I'm just going to cut the meat now. Some people put kidneys in. Some people put oysters in. There's a kind of variety. Additional veg and so forth. Personally, I think it's kind of over-egging it. I don't really think that that's kind of necessary. But let's just talk about the meat now. So basically, for the meat, what I'm using tonight is lamb. You can use beef. For those that aren't kind of familiar with the anatomy of the animal, and if there's any vegetarians, and I apologise, this perhaps isn't the tool for you, but it's about the quality of the meat that you use, where it's sourced from. So what we're using here tonight is a combination of, from the neck, so that's good, slow cooking meat, and we're using some from the chump, which is C. Where's C there? There you go. So that's at the top of the leg. In fact, if you keep on cutting, you get kind of leg steaks. So that's what chump is. So I'm just going to go into the oven. I'm just going to show you now what a 2-hour cooked version looks like. I'm going to take the lid off, and then we're going to crack on. And then in half an hour's time, this is ready to the final. So in classic sort of Blue Peter style, this has now been in the oven for just under, oops, it's fallen off, just over 2 hours. So you can see it's starting to kind of brown nicely. So we're going to take now the lid off this. This is in, so this is at 170 degrees. This is for a long kind of slow cook. I'm going to pop this back in now, and hopefully in about 20 minutes, that is going to be totally ready. So in the meantime then, let us crack on. So yes, so we've got a mix here of neck fillet, which is quite fatty, lots of connective tissue, but that's going to break down as you cook. And we've got chump chops, which are kind of leaner. Now then, traditionally, you would leave the bone in. It's very, very good for flavour. And often these are cooked kind of with chops. And in fact, what traditionally they often did was literally kind of sit them like this and do a layer. And just going to leave them like that so you can easily portion them up. But that's obviously, we're not going to do that. So I'm going to take the bone out. But the bone does add a lot of flavour, but obviously then fiddly kind of get rid of it. And when I say traditionally, so let's now do our best. So obviously what we're doing is we're taking the bone out of this meat. So it's a little bit fiddly, but it's not particularly difficult to do. You just want to be able to just try and follow the knife around, and it should just come away. If you're into making stocks, pop these in the freezer into a box, and then you've got a very easy source of kind of stock meat. So let's put a bowl. Let's get a bowl for this meat. So what we're going to do is we're going to toss this in flour when we're kind of done with the meat, because what that does is, whilst the gravy it's not going to be a sort of thick standard your 4-cup gravy, but it's nice to have a bit of thickening on it. So that does just work to have a little bit of gravy and keep it all kind of nice and moist in there. Basically, what it's going to do is just cook in its own kind of liquids. So, as I say, the history of kind of stewing is really as old as humanity itself. But when it comes to this particular stew, obviously, this is very much a product of the potato revolution. And we sort of forget, that kind of potatoes haven't been with us all of humanity, because we've come to kind of rely on them to such a kind of great degree in our kind of food preparation. I think it's in about 10,000 years ago in South America and sort of Peru they kind of first start, but it's not until the 16th century that we have potatoes over here in Europe, in Britain and Ireland. I'll say it's very similar to Irish stew as well. And so, consequently, it's often one of the great sort of mistakes people talk about turnips, as if turnips were kind of what we use for potatoes, and it's not true. Did anybody know actually what we did use? Because it wasn't turnips, which was the kind of the male kind of carb source, as you might say, before. By the way, if you wanted to cook this with meat, but you can't get lamb, I know it's not so easy to get hold of in North America, beef skirt will work really, really nice. Again, long, slow cook. So exactly the same technique as this. 2 hours in the oven, then a half an hour with the top off. So yeah, does anybody know what we used for sauces? Yeah, barley grains, very, very good. That's definitely it, barley grains, and particularly oatmeal. So oatmeal, I'll show you in a sec when I've done the meat. So oatmeal, basically, in fact, my hands are wiped, it's just in here. Oh, I've touched it. So you see in there, can you see? That's like, it's sort of milled up porridge oats, basically. And I know in North America you tend to call oatmeal like porridge oats, but actually it tends to be sort of finer kind of grain as that. And what that meant, of course, then, was that when you cooked meals, that acted as a thickening agent. And the reason that oatmeal was particularly popular was it's a brilliant source of carbs, whereas actually turnip is a terrible source of carbs. In fact, turnip is such a low-carb meal that you can be on keto diets and eat as much turnip as you like. So consequently, that's the kind of the reason. But the difference was, of course, then, was that they were making these oatmeal sort of broths and stews, sort of thick soups, really. And so it was a very, very different kind of texture. They used to have, if you sort of go back, in history through the centuries, the main eating sort of device is a spoon and a bowl. So, yeah, it was turnips and Swedes are two different things, Dawn. So we should kind of make sure we're talking about the same thing, the small kind of white Swedes, of course, are sort of slightly yellowy in colour, much sort of sweeter texture. There's not much flavour to a turnip, really. But so consequently, the food and the meals in the archaeology that were found, is tend to be eaten with a spoon and with a bowl. So a very kind of different kind of way of eating. So once obviously potatoes come along, we get this wholly kind of different, almost way of eating. So the introduction of potato isn't just about changing diets; it's about changing the way we eat as well. So yeah, oatmeal very much obviously a breakfast staple these days. But of course, throughout history, it's been used for a wide variety, and some people will still use cereals, things like oatmeal, barley, and these sort of things for in their soups when they're making their kind of winter casseroles and so forth. So it's still kind of used, but a bit more sort of traditional perhaps than it would have been at one time. To get rid of these bits of bone off here. So I say, if you are into cooking, just wash my hands. What was that? Yeah, so if you're into making stocks, if you really are kind of quite serious about cookery, then the best thing with your bones is just chuck them into a bag in the freezer, and then when you've got enough of them, you've got great access to something to make stock from. So that's my recommendation. So this is the neck fillet now, so you can see the neck sort of running through it, the bone. So this is a lot sort of fattier, kind of blobbier, the meat, but very good for flavour. So again, as I say, if you're not sort of squeamish about these things, it is quite interesting, I think, to kind of learn about the anatomy, how obviously meat comes to us, so that it's not under polythene in supermarkets, that there is an animal, we need to concern ourselves with animal welfare and so forth, but we can be responsible in the way that we source the meat. Thank you. So I say, this is, you can sort of see the sort of slightly different colour this is going, but this is going to add to bags of flavour to the meat, so deep, rich flavour. Now, traditionally, of course, they would use mutton. And mutton is very, very hard to come by these days, which is a huge kind of surprise when you think about what it is, because it's an awful lot more sustainable in many respects, because obviously an animal is living a longer life, and obviously they need to eat more. But basically, if we go back to the kind of the medieval period, and we think about how people lived, you had sheep for two main purposes. You had them for wool and for milk. And so basically, the families would. So right now, so we've done that. We'll get some flour now. So let me just get another plate. And having everything to hand here is a little difficult. So I'll just get rid of this. Get rid of that there. Hopefully we're all okay. And I'm just going to wash my hands again. So people would have sheep, obviously, and they would obviously be there primarily for female sheep, of course, would have produce milk for them, but also, of course, shearing sheep. Now, consequently, by the time sheep actually came to be eaten, they're often very, very old because, for obvious reasons, you're not going to get rid of, a good sheep that's producing a lot of wool, and they produce, pounds and pounds of wool every year. So consequently, it was some flour in here. We're just going to add this onto the meat just to give it a bit of extra, if you like, in terms of thickening agent. So flour, of course, is great for doing this. You can add a whole range of things, but flour is just the simplest. So again, we'll just put some salt and pepper in there. So consequently, by the time your sheep had got to the stage where it was no longer kind of productive, either producing kind of milk or, growing, especially well, was literally kind of dying of old age, at that point, they would often sacrifice and eat them as mutton. So a very, very kind of different experience to what we have now, whereby everything is kind of young. So there'd be a lot stronger, a lot kind of gamier flavours. So these kind of dishes would have be a lot more kind of robust in flavour than we would expect now. But again, if you're using beef, then you're going to get some of that anyway, particularly something like skirt, which has got a very deep, rich, sort of beefy kind of flavour. If you want a really kind of extreme flavour, if you're really into your meaties, try oxtail. Because oxtail, of course, is incredibly sort of strong, kind of meat flavoured. So it really is sort of up to you how you kind of go about this. But in essence, it's all about flavour. You're only going to get out what you put in. So do think about seasoning. So there's our meat done. So next up, we're going to layer in we'll get our pot back over here, and we're just now going to pop the meat in and around. So again, so hi those that have arrived while I've been chatting. Sorry if I haven't acknowledged you, but as you can see, this is a live cookery demonstration that we're involved with. So consequently, it's easy. So the floured meat, as I say, it doesn't really do much. It just acts as a sort of thickening agent. It won't affect the flavour, but what it'll ensure is that there is sufficient in there just to bulk up the gravy a little bit, make it a little bit thicker than otherwise it would be. So we're going to use stock in here. So we've now got our meat layer in. So you can see it's a layering kind of dish. If you've done lasagnas or you've done moussakas or that sort of thing, it's exactly the same principle. There's nothing kind of sort of difficult about it. So before we go any further, let us now... I cook every day, LS. Basically I am, a home cook. So the difficulty of this is more getting organised and trying to doing it sort of live and having everything where you need it, because obviously, if I'm at home, I've got everything just as I'm going to need it. Here, less so. So I'm just going to wash my board, so bear with me just a minute. And again, I'm going to want to use my peeler, which I haven't got with me. So I'm going to grab myself nuts, trying to peel. In fact, it's not the end of the world using carrots, with the kind of skin on. As long as they're clean and I've given these a good wash, then it isn't really especially important. By the time that they are kind of cooked through, then you're going to have a little opportunity. So let's pop the bay leaf in at this stage. So we want the bay leaf right in the middle. I'm using fresh, but you can use dried. Okay, so we've got a bay leaf in the centre of there, and then let's put some more thyme leaf. So again, I've just got a thyme plant just over here. See thyme plant. So it's good to have thyme young. It gets very woody and dense and quite intense, the flavour over time. So we're just going to pick the leaves in here. Even though the stalks are pretty delicate, it's not going to really affect us. It's just nice just to have a little lightness just with the leaves. And we'll just put a few more in. So as I say, this is just about adding a little bit of flavour. What's been prepared, Joyce? Joyce, we're preparing a dish called Lancashire Hotpot, a very traditional meat and potatoes casserole. And sort of where this kind of came from originally then was the arrival of the potato was a kind of game changer. We stopped eating everything with kind of oatmeal and potatoes became a huge staple. And certainly by the sort of 18th century, so we're just putting herbs and fresh thyme now. By the kind of middle of the 18th century, potatoes were affordable, they're accessible, everybody was eating potatoes. So just put that to one side now. And now we're going to chop up our, once I just do a knife, onions. So onions is like the third of the kind of holy trinity that we've got here. So we've got obviously, we've got potatoes in there so far. We've got our meat, obviously with flavour. We've got thyme, we've got the bay leaf in there. So now the onions are going to really sort of add to this. And again, just long, slow cooking. I mean, there is a school of thought that says cook them beforehand. Rosemary good, yeah, absolutely. Rosemary work, and any kind of strong headiness is going to add in sort of flavour. This is very similar to Betty's Hot Pot. For those that don't know, the long-running show Coronation Street for years featured in the Rome's Return pub Betty's Hot Pot. It's all she ever made, day after day. And of course, it is set in the fictional town of Weatherfield, which masquerades as a town on the outskirts of Manchester. So consequently, she would have been cooking Betty's Hot Pot is Lancashire Hot Pot. So what we're having now is in effect. So would rosemary work? Yes. Definitely would work. I'd watch how much you put in, because if it's a mature rosemary, what happens with rosemary is it gets stronger and stronger. They've both got the same thing. The essential element is called thymol. So that's like your essential oil. For those who are into essential oils and that sort of thing, extraction, it's thymol. And basically, as plants get older, the thymol gets more and more concentrated. So if you've got a very, very mature plant, it can be kind of intense. So just sort of bear in mind, how much you put in it. But other than that, knock yourself out, whatever you sort of fancy. So again, if you're cutting, good demonstration, good technique element of it is rather than go like this with your fingers out, if you put your fingers there and you're running, all that can happen is you get little nicks, but you can't really cut yourself. So always have your fingers sort of behind the knife. And you should find, let's say, any other hair was purple. Mrs. Slocum are being compared to now. I don't know how that's come up, but I'm going to let it pass, but secretly. So yeah, just run your fingers down the side of it, and you should keep you safe. So again, there's no kind of right way or wrong way really to cut onions on this. It's going into a casserole, so consequently, we'll just lose that little bit there. So just the core of the onion. You don't really want those little stubby bits where the onion grows. They're a bit nasty, so we'll lose that. But as I say, we're just really... So again, once we've got our onion, we'll bring it back. So we don't brown the lamb. And I'll tell you the reason why. This is a very traditional recipe. And the reason they didn't is this became incredibly popular with the mill workers of Lancashire. And this is how they prepared it. I'll tell you the reason they prepared it is they didn't have stoves. They lived in very small, cramped accommodation, didn't really have the opportunity to cook well. What they did have was access to bread ovens. And this was the bakers. In each of the small towns and the villages near the mills, there would be a bread baker. And I'm sure it's much the same wherever you go, whatever country you're from. And so what would happen, of course, is on the way in to work, they would take a pot. And the pot, I brought one along actually, would be kind of not dissimilar to this sort of thing here. You see this kind of ceramic affair with a lid. And basically what you'd do is you'd layer up all the ingredients as I'm doing here, take that then to the bakers, and when the baker had finished doing all the daily bread, the oven's still hot, right, because it's going to gradually cool down. And so you'd put all these tins, these kettles of food into the baker's oven. And then as the oven sort of gradually kind of slowed down, cooled down, it's a perfect slow cook. So consequently, by the time you finish your shift, you go home by the baker's, pick up your kettle, and you've got a hot meal to kind of come home to. So I guess that's a very traditional. So that's the reason why I'm doing it like this. I'm not browning the onions. I'm not browning the meat, because this is how it would have been cooked in its earliest times, when this was a staple meal for the kind of the working class poor. Baker does this since a couple of weeks, tradition. Okay, so you're utilising, aren't you, the assets of the village, really. You know, the baker's got a hot oven, it's cooling down, so consequently it works for everybody. There's a little bit of skin there, let's get rid of that. Yeah, so the onions are going to cook. They're going to have 2 hours, sort of slow cook in the oven. So we're not going to worry. I'm just going to have a look at this, see how we get on with that. I think that might be. Yeah, I think we'll just turn that off now. So the onions are basically going to braise into the liquid. So again, we'll just work them in a little bit. We'll get some salt and pepper going across the top. So you can see it's just a layering dish. We're all about this. It's just layering up, and could substitute onion for fennel. You could. I mean, fennel of course brings with it a what's the flavour I'm looking at? It's like aniseed, isn't it? Fennel. So that would kind of bring a very different vibe to it. It certainly wouldn't be traditional, but equally it wouldn't be offensive. I'm just going to give my board a little clean, and we'll start again. So sorry, I keep going off camera, but as I say, if you're doing this, hopefully in a couple of years' time, Heygo will have kind of got their head around at-home stuff and will have kind of worked it in to giving us a kind of much more effective platform. So, sorry, at times it's a little bit lumpy in terms of the way this is kind of being done, but it is just how it is working what we've got. So I'm just going to have one more last little look just to see if I can find a peeler, because if I can peel these carrots, I will. Otherwise, I'll just do them as is. But this is the problem with being here rather than at home, is I haven't got everything to hand. So I thought I brought it, so that's why I'm a little bit. So just bear with me 1 minute. You can look at some carrots. Who doesn't want to look at carrots? I mean, it is a beautiful thing to behold, is a carrot. But let me just try in this bag. So, as I say, apologies that it's gone a bit crappy, this section. But I thought I brought one. Clearly not. Never mind. We'll have to manage. So I think for the purpose of this, I'm not going to. I've already washed these carrots, so I think with the cook time that we've got, we will just we're just going to go with. So again, with this, what we're looking to do really is got a lovely bush of carrots. Thank you. Is just really create circles. So quite thick, because what they've got to stand up for is a 2 hour in the oven kind of cook time. So we're looking at sort of something around that kind of sort of size, and. This is really just to add a touch of sweetness in. So, carrots, orange carrots can find a purple, dearer. Well, I don't know what it is with purple veg, because most of it that you buy doesn't stay purple when you cook it. So, I can sort of see why it might look funky on your allotment, but I can't really kind of figure what the point of cooking with it is, apart from red cabbage. And actually, pickled red cabbage is the traditional serving. I'm going to do some Savoy cabbage today with a little bit of a red currant jelly on there. So, it's as simple as that, really. The carrots are just going to add in that bit of sweetness. So we're just seeing in. We're going to stick these in. We're going to add some more salt and pepper. We're going to put some more thyme in there. And I'm just going to go put the kettle on in a minute as well, because I need to make up some stock to go over this. So let me just fill the kettle. So you can see, I'm doing all this in kind of real time, sort of talking to you. This is not difficult cookery. But of course, what it is, as I say, it's very, very kind of traditional. So as I say, originally this would have been done with mutton. And that was much more widely available than it is today mutton. And then, as I say, sort of slow cooked. So perfect for people going away to work, coming back. So Clive from Manchester, all around Manchester and East Lancashire, the mill towns, everybody essentially works. There's about 500,000 people, kind of working in the mills. And basically, kind of Lancashire Hotpot is what kind of kept them going. It was an absolute kind of staple of working class food. This is non-sophisticated food, but actually, if you get good ingredients and you season it up as you go, as we're doing here, layer after layer, purple cauliflower. Again, does it hold its colour when you cook it? I generally don't know. But a lot of them that I've had, they look, that sounds like a nice idea, purple, but they just turn orange or whatever, yellow in the pan. So it's like, what's the point, really? Not a veggie person, no. Yes, it's very basic. I mean, there's kind of nothing really that you can kind of get wrong in this, really, other than, you might be a little bit impatient and I suppose, make it look a little bit, messy, I suppose, for want of a better word. Purple bell peppers turned green and cooked. What Robin, I think, a lot do, and that's the point I was making, is that if they look good in the store, great, but I kind of want more than that. I want something to kind of hold its colour and hold its kind of attractiveness in the cooking process. So there we are. We just put one bit of kind of pepper over the top. So we've now got, if you like, we've got our meat, haven't we? Just think about it from the bottom upwards. We've got our layers, haven't we? We've got our 2 layers of potato at the bottom, salt and pepper. We've now got, on top of that, obviously we've got our floured meat. We've got our onions, we've got our carrots, we've got thyme, we've got salt and pepper in there. So we've got it all kind of going on in there. So it's time to crack our Mandolin back over. Let's give our board a wipe. There's no carrots on it, so I'm not too worried about cross-contamination at this point. And let's get our friend the Mandolin back, and we're going to do our 3 remaining potatoes. And hot, exactly, no frozen. I think you're from the northwest, aren't you, Lethargy? That's exactly what it is. It's unsophisticated food. But, it is, the foods that sort of drove the empire in terms of this is what people ate. This is what the workers ate. And as I say, before that, before the sort of potato comes along, it's cornmeal and oatmeal stews and everything. So you can see that's kind of quite welcome, really, for a lot of people. It's just good food. So let's just sort of move that along. So as I say, we are cooking today with lamb, for those that have joined late. I'm using Maris Piper potatoes for the good reason that they are both excellent for mash and excellent for chips. And basically what you've got in this dish, in effect, is you've got a bottom layer, which is almost like a mash, so that's stuck. Get my fingers out of it, otherwise you can get really cut yourself nastily if you're not careful with these things. So do be careful of using them, but they are great for speed. Orange carrots. There's a great story about carrots. I don't know if you know it. I may have told you this before, so apologies. I know I repeat myself in stories. So if you've heard it before, don't shout out. But there's a great story about carrots, and how everybody says that you see in the dark. We all know that story, right? That carrots help you see in the dark. Yeah, do you know that story? We all heard that. We've all been taught that as children. So the reason for that is we have to go back, if we're going to understand how that came into being, is we've got to go back, and it relates to the Second World War. And it's the period right after the Battle of Britain. Britain has almost... So I'm just going to start. So again, this first layer, use your smaller bits of potato that you've got, and then just try and get a covering, really, and then we'll really try and work in the bigger bits on top so we can get nice even. So basically, Britain had just about managed to kind of hang on through the Battle of Britain, but we were up against really kind of deadly firepower from the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. They were incredibly sort of well engineered, well kind of bit Messerschmitt planes and all these kind of really kind of deathly effective machines. And so there's a secret project. Hello, Alex. There's a secret project that was put together by both the Americans and the British. And it was radar. In other words, the ability to be able to see where objects are based on their kind of movements and so forth. And of course, it was, a huge advantage. But it had to be kept in secret because they knew that if the Germans became aware that they were working with kind of radar, then they'd develop their own, and so they'd lose the advantage. And so they had to test it, and so they picked a squadron of flyers over in Lincolnshire, in England. And of course they started getting these horrendously high kind of death rates and kills. And to put the Luftwaffe off the scent, as you might say, they put out the story that, because they were in Lancashire, eating lots of carrots, that they had this fantastic eyesight. And so the Germans bought it, and it gave us about a year of kind of development time to basically get this product that was perfect. So that by the time we got to kind of D-Day in 1944, we had total air supremacy over the Luftwaffe. And it was basically because we knew where they were, they didn't know where we were. Brilliant, exactly, disinformation. B's got it absolutely 100% right there. So we're now into kind of our top layer. Before we put some butter on, let me just kind of make up some stock. So we'll just put this to one side. I'll get us a... Yeah, disinflation is incredibly helpful. I mean, there's stuff kind of leading up to the Second World War. It was famous for it. I mean, we pretended, didn't we, that we were going to invade further down and via Sicily. There's all sorts of kind of subterfuge going on that is in essence is incredibly important, isn't it? If you're going to ensure that. So we're going to have 700 mils of stock for this. So this we're going to use is we're going to use a cube and a half. So 1 and a half one. Okay. So we're a half one over there. Okay. So we're going to have 700 mils of water in our jug. And basically what we're looking to do here, and trial and error says to me it's about 700 mil, should do the job for us. We are looking to kind of get this sort of halfway, not more than halfway up, rather, sort of to the base layer of the bottom of the potato. So that'll keep everything kind of nice and moist. So I'm just going to crumble this into here. I don't know what you can see because obviously the chat's on kind of top. Looks like superb winter. Yeah, that's what it is, Alex. But obviously it was a... Yeah, I mean, as you say, Linda, there's some truth in it, but as I say, it was largely a kind of subterfuge. So I'm using a lamb stock. I'm using a Knorr lamb stock. Hi, Alex. So that's what we're kind of using today. And again, you can use anything really. Obviously, if you're using, a beef in here, if you say you use skirt, it's probably the best sort of beef to kind of use for that. But any kind of stew, anything sort of stewing beef or braising beef, we're going to work nicely. But you want something sort of slow cooked. You want something that's got a lot of connective tissue because you've had this corned beef. Yeah, and that's the thing, in Liverpool they call it scouse. We've got labscouse, which is kind of Viking word, isn't it? That kind of goes all the way back. There's infinite varieties. Irish stew. This is, in essence, Irish stew. In Ireland, they don't tend to crisp the potatoes on the top, so that tends to be the difference. Lamb in stock cubes, yep. So we'll stir it up. So the varieties really are. Yeah, low sodium is good. Yeah, there's Callow or something. They do a low sodium one. I've got some of those at home. Sometimes I use them for Humphrey's food, so I don't want salt in there. Just want to say, Scouse is amazing. Absolutely, Scouse is amazing. But essentially it's the same. It's potato, it's meat, it's vegetables. So nobody's really claiming that they own this. This version is just called Lancashire Hotpot. And Hotpot, by the way, comes from a hodgepodge. The kind of the earliest. Information that we have about this, it was from kind of French word. It appears, I believe, in the 18th century, or 17th century, I think, in the first time. There are, oops, sorry, just dropped something there. I do apologise. Stay there. You're not going to. Right, so let's pull those. Repeat myself. This tour is 60 minutes, correct? Yeah, it should be. So we're 15 minutes to go. So. We're not doing too bad, are we? So, by pouring this kind of stock gravy, if you like, over the top of the potatoes, again, you're adding more sort of flavour in. So, don't be kind of scared to really kind of spin it around. And what we're looking for is it to be basically sort of coming up to the level of the potatoes here. So, obviously, I've already made one earlier. So, you see how now that's just sort of touching on the base of it, but we're going to put another layer of potato in, so consequently, we don't have to worry too much about that. It's about perfect. So now finally, we'll do some salt and pepper again on top. It's all about seasoning, right? And this time we'll just try and get a nice kind of repeating sort of fishbone pattern, as you might say, like fish scales. So this is where it's nice to have your larger slices of potato. It just gives a nice kind of look, sort of scalloping. And of course, when that comes out of the oven later on, all your hard work will be rewarded, and people will go, "Oh, that looks great! That's amazing!" because people are pleased. We're also suckers, aren't we? For a bit of golden crunch crumbs. So I think that looks pretty good. So our final kind of touch that we're going to do before we go into the oven, I'm just going to pop this back in the microwave, is we're going to put some melted butter on there. And what the butter is going to do, of course, is it's going to just crisp everything up nicely. Dive right in there. Absolutely, well, you can do in a minute. We're just going to prepare up a little bit of veg, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out. And this is what I'm having for my tea tonight, by the way. So, gratin, it is kind of a mix of all, and that's exactly dauphinoise. That's very similar. So, and that's why you might want to think about using a different kind of potato that I've used. But to get this crispness on the top, I think that Mary's Piper just worked beautifully. So that's my kind of recommendation. So I don't know, again, how widely they're available outside this country, but, basically you want something that's good at chips and something that's good for mashed potatoes. So, but yeah, the French, they're all clever, aren't they? They invent all these cookery techniques, and then we kind of bastardize them. So I think that hotchpotch originally is a French term. But of course the hot pot is the cooking method as well, isn't it? So, the hot pot going into the oven. So we talked about earlier, going to the baking oven and kind of sitting there. So it's quite a nice idea, isn't it, of thinking of coming home from a day at the factory and then having, a nice warming bowl of stew. So there we go. You can't overdo it really with the butter on that. It really is, it's kind of a lot of fun. So Stefan joins us from Amsterdam. Hello, Stefan. So that, in essence, is what would go in the oven. And you would then put a lid on it, like that, and that would go in for 2 hours. I'll put the recipe up on my Facebook group afterwards. So consequently, that would go in. You want the oven at about 170, but I'll put this information up there. And you're going to want to cook that then for 2 hours. And then after 2 hours, what you're going to want to do is you're going to take off the lid, and basically it's going to brown and it's going to crisp. Okay? So, yeah, you can't have too much butter. Don't really worry about over buttering. That's not really a problem in this neighbourhood. So we've got a few minutes left. So let us just think, because it's a really kind of simple sort of recipe of this. So again, I'll just give the board of potatoes. Sorry about that. Facebook info. Right, so my Facebook info is All Points North with John. So it's a Facebook group that I've got. So this cabbage is pre-washed. So it's Savoy cabbage. So again, very traditional. And because you've already got the onions in there, you've already got the potatoes in it, essentially it's a meal in itself. It's just nice to have something green, right? So this is really kind of gilding the lily, really. You don't actually need, you could just have it as a kind of one-pot meal. But I think it works kind of nice to have some kind of cabbage in here. So we're just going to do this. So again, we'll just stick I've already pre-washed this, so obviously you make sure that you're washing. Thank you, Robin. That's very good. So, and none of you knew I could cook, did you? So there you go. That's why Mrs. Wright thought I was a catch, I think. I don't know how to post it on Heygo, but I'll look into that. So that's all pre-washed. So I'm just going to put the kettle back up, and obviously you sort of forget that nobody's on Facebook, but obviously it's the most convenient method we've got of communicating. So just also, you could give me a follow. If you want to give me a follow, I'll post it on there as well. So that's another opportunity for those. So I think that we will. What should I do? Shall I just bring us over here? You don't really see my hands, do you? To see. Do you want to see me? There we go. There's me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just quickly cook up some cabbage. So look at that. And what we're going to do is, because obviously what we've got with the lamb is it's quite greasy, quite sort of fatty. Obviously it's kind of rich, and so just to kind of take the edge off that, or to contrast with it, I'm going to add some red currant jelly just in with the cabbage. So traditionally this will be served with pickled cabbage. So those that kind of I'm sure it's widely available, or cranberry or anything that's got a kind of slight sweetness to it, will kind of work really, really nicely. So that basically it's just a kind of contrast. Just cook through the rich kind of gelatinous, sweet and tangy, absolutely. So you're going to sweet and sour. It's like you have duck, don't you, with plum sauce, or kind of these often gaminess. So particularly as well, if you're having, thank you, Hadrian, if you're having mutton, if you're doing anything like that, you'd certainly want to have something. It just helps to kind of cut through that kind of richness. So cranberry would work beautifully. Red currant. Even if you've got it sort of black currant jam or something like that, because again, it's kind of quite tart, isn't it? Mint would work as well. So it's just something just to set against that, the richness of the lamb. Let's just get the oven going. So I'm going to stick that on. Should we go handheld? Or let's just swing it around here. So I'm really quite pleased with how this camera setup has worked. I think it's done okay, hasn't it? We've done all right today. So if I get us round here. Hey, look at that. Where are we at? Oh, do you know what? I'm going to just do it by hand. It's going to be easier and quicker. So, you say we've done this all in kind of real time. So I'm just going to get ready to pop this on here. So let's come back down. So again, just on the cabbage, doesn't need much. And we're going to literally cook this for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm not really into cabbage being sort of overdone. I'm not going to put any salt in it. Let's just pop the lid on there. Sorry, Beowulf, come off the... Right, so that will... I'll put that information up. So the oven temperature we use for this is 170, so it really is kind of quite low. It's not actually, hot. It's a long kind of slow cook. So while that is cooking, let me just go back onto the gimbal now, and hopefully I can just get this switched on, and then you can see me. I can go hands-free again. Because this is the difficulty of what I'm doing here is maintaining it kind of hands-free, because obviously you can't really do a right lot when you are. So sorry, that's a bit conky, but I'll just switch the gimbal on. 170 degrees centigrade, yeah, absolutely. So it's a pretty, really cool. Yes, we're going to do that. No, we're going to get that out of the oven just now. So 2.5 hours, so that's now had. So it's 2.5 hours in the oven. So let me now get that out, and then we'll move across. You should be able to see it. Okay. So let me just carry that down. So this is the kind of look that you're trying to achieve, basically. Is nice and crispy, a little bit gnarly, a little bit kind of burnt. So basically, you've got lovely crispiness on the top. You can see down as it kind of cook through. We've got our layers. That's the reason you can use Pyrex. So you're obviously going to get layers. We can see some of our kind of carrots in there. So you wouldn't normally say use kind of Pyrex, but I just thought it would be quite useful way for us to kind of think about what we're kind of creating. So thinking it almost like a kind of lasagna type thing. So if you just wait for 2 minutes towards the end of the tour, I'll say exactly what we're doing. I'm going to wait for the cabbage to get ready, and I'll serve a proportion of that so you can see what it is that we're trying to kind of look at. So for those that are from the northwest, I hope that I have done you something like proud, and that's what you can do. Obviously, as I say, we've got out the cook time. So we've got 2. So I've got another one. The other one, as you saw, is over here. So that's what it looks like. Where's your fork? So that cabbage, I think, now will be getting something like. So if I just pop this down, I'm running out of places to put a microphone. So your hot pot is just fun, isn't it? So I'll just put it over there. That cabbage. So let me just dish up. So let me see. I'm trying to think where I can put this so you can see. Because obviously I'm on a different gimbal here. If I do that. If I do that. And... you can see there, can't you? Right? That just about works. The gas number. So the temperature for this, as I say, we're looking at 170 degrees centigrade, which is quite a cool oven. So you have to look it up. It's about 350. Gas mark 3.5. Yeah, it's quite low because you're looking for slow cook. And what you don't obviously want to do is, because you put it, no problem whatsoever. So let us now just bring across our cabbage, which is just nicely sort of cooked through. So again, we've got that's not a great angle, is it? Let's just try and do my best. There you go. Are the potatoes in the oven? So I put it in the oven firstly. Like if I just bring this one over, for those who didn't see it, for the first 2 hours you're cooking like this with a lid on. You can't see that. You've got a lid on. So basically, that's going to keep the moisture in. But then after 2 hours, for the last 30 minutes, you're taking the top off and allowing that butter then to kind of crisp up. So let's do that. I don't know one actually. Okay, great. Hello, Mum. as they say in all the best movies. Let me just get a plate, and we will show you what Lancashire Hotpot looks like. So, just get some cabbage as well. So I'll just put that. So I'm running out of space here, as you can probably guess. So I don't know how well you can see there, but basically it should be, if you've done a reasonable job. What you don't want to be seeing is kind of lots and lots of excess moisture. And I think if you've got the kind of consistency sort of right, it should sort of sit in its own sort of pile, if you know what I mean. If you're sort of seeing it swimming in liquor, then I think that you've probably not done sort of full justice to it. But you can then add in, obviously, so you can see there, hopefully, the meat, the carrots. I'm just going to add in, just draining it as we go, some cabbage, and that really is, very northern, very authentic working class food. Nothing fancy, very tasty. But as I say, this is the staple food of the Industrial Revolution. This is what kept people going through long shifts. With the perfect carbohydrate, of course. You get lots and lots of kind of, not the nutrition is not fantastic, of course, in potatoes, but it'll keep you going for a long time. And so this is what people lived on, is food like this. Very simple, but there we go. So that is my take on the Heygo Food Academy. I haven't seen anybody else's yet, which is kind of rather remiss of me. I should have kind of watched, shouldn't I, to find out what other people are doing. I don't know how they've done their setups, I don't know how they've done the filming, but that's what I've done, and I've enjoyed doing it, and so I do hope you've enjoyed being with me. We are actually finishing a little bit early, so if there's the currant jelly, I forgot to put it on. You're absolutely right. So I should have just mixed that through in the pan. I just forgot about that, so I apologise. So any questions that I've missed, because obviously, we've got a couple of minutes now. Best drink with this. I mean, I would tend to drink an ale with this because it's kind of robust. Obviously, if you want wine traditionally with lamb, you would serve kind of red wine. But it's kind of really up to you. But I think beer would work great with this. It's a kind of nice, robust kind of dish. So, as I say, stout would work well. Absolutely kind of robust. So, we'll put the recipe up there. I'll try and do it on Heygo. I'll definitely do it on Facebook, and I'll definitely do it for those that follow me. We'll kind of find a way. I'll sort of put it in the. But I'm not sure you can find the chat. How do you find a tour that's already been on? I'll think about it. I'll find out if there is a way. Like, cool. As with all these things, if it does cool for 20 minutes, half an hour, that's probably good. It'll allow the flavours to kind of meld. It heats up very, very nicely, so it's dead easy to kind of heat up the next day. No end to my talents or beginnings, one way or another. So, as I say, we'll get the recipe up there. Hopefully, as I say, it was pretty self-explanatory. Any special bread served with? Again, because you've got a bit of liquor in there, that'd work nicely, kind of just dipping it in. And again, this is how people kind of got by, isn't it? Is by lots and lots of kind of cheap ingredients. So obviously bread was, if you let it sit for about half an hour with the sauce, as time goes on, definitely more and more will get kind of absorbed into the potato. Savoy cabbage, so Savoy. I don't know if they call that in North America, but in essence, that's what we call it, Savoy cabbage. So it's a crinkle, so you can see. Let's go back to see where the plate is over here. Sorry, I forgot about that. It's distinguished by the fact that it's got this usually very, very dark green, so kind of very rich in iron, and it's kind of crinkle cut. So the only thing with Savoy to watch is just drain it, because you've got all those little pockets of moisture. Obviously, it can be very damp, so give it a good shake. Best use a pair of tongs and give it a good kind of shake. So that's it. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, who left for your Savoy is not that green. Thank you, everybody who's kind of joined. Thank you. If you had a question and I missed it, when I post up the recipe of the Facebook group, those are in it. If you want to ask a question, then you can do. Otherwise, I will take it that we are all done. I'll make cauliflower reese in a burrito bowl. Yes, well, I'm going to eat this. I'm going to take this home and have this for tea. So I'm going to go home and very, very shortly. So that's why I'm keen to not outstay my welcome. Put it on yesterday. on the left of the screen, the main page. I'll have a look. I'll find out what I do. I'll ask other guys. They'll kind of know what they'd be doing. But I'll find a way, some way of getting it to you. And if there's anybody that really doesn't want to be on Facebook, you can always email me. So thank you, everybody. Been lovely to see you. We are exactly on an hour. So with that in mind, thank you to everybody. Thank you to Alex, as I say, for coming up with this idea. I think it's a great idea. And hopefully you've learned a bit about Northern culture, about Northern people. And if you want to get an authentic taste of Northern England, there it is. So there we go. One last look at the dish. And then I'm going to say goodbye. So it is, as I say, crispy potatoes on top, soft potatoes underneath, and you've got lots and lots of lovely meat and vegetables in there. So there we go. Thank you, everybody. And I'll see you very, very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.